All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Science on Tap Minocqua, our Zoom edition. Thank you for coming. My name is Susan Knight. Science on Tap is an example of the Wisconsin idea, an idea conceived in 1905 that the boundaries of the university are the boundaries of the state. Our partners in Science on Tap Minocqua include University of Wisconsin Trout Lake Station, University of Wisconsin Kemp Natural Resources Station, the UW Lakeland, the Badger chapter of the Lakeland, I missed that completely. Lakeland Badger chapter of the Wisconsin Alumni Association, sorry about that, the Minocqua Public Library, and in the past, it's been the Minocqua Brewing Company, which is closed now, but we hope will reopen sometime in the near future. And Science on Tap is supported through a grant from the Brittingham Fund to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And don't forget, there are 3 ways to watch. You can watch on Zoom, as I expect most of you are. And if you are on Zoom, you'll be able to ask questions. And you'll see the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. We'll give you more instructions about that in a little bit. But you can also watch on YouTube. It's not interactive, but maybe that's a little bit easier. Both options have links on our website, Science on Tap Minocqua. Or you can watch any event later. We tape all of these, and we also make a short version of them that takes a little while before that one is ready to go, but you can watch any archive video after the fact. Our next event on April 7th, I am very excited to announce we will have artist Mary Burns talking about her art and science project, Women and Water. Some of you may have seen Mary's earlier project on ancestral women. And in this new project, Mary uses her loom to create exquisite images of women who have dedicated their lives to water in some way. So that'll be next month in April 7th. Before I introduce our speaker, can everyone find their chat button, not the Q&A, but the chat button? Let me know where you wish you were calling from. Let's see what we get. Belize. All right. Yeah, I could see someone wishing that they were down in Belize. Me too. Spain, Hawaii. Okay. Kelowna, BC. I know who that is. Kippy's from Rhinelander, Mr. Winters. Indianapolis. Okay. At the Riviera.
Kippers.
Friends of yours, I take it.
Fellow travel.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, so any tech problems that you have during the presentation, use the chat window, but we're going to close that off to the audience right now. But tonight we have Dr. Dennis Winters to discuss Wisconsin's economy in a presentation he's calling, How Crazy Was It? And What's the Next Normal? Dennis was born and raised in Madison and was an undergrad at UW-Madison in Ag Econ and Natural Resources. He continued his education at Colorado State and then eventually returned to Madison. Dr. Winters has several titles, including Chief Economist and Director of the Bureau of Workforce Information. He is recognized as an expert on human resource challenges in the competitive global economic environment. And his expertise includes regional and national macroeconomics, energy and labor markets, and economic impact analysis. Tonight, he's going to discuss the 2020 economic and workforce impacts of COVID-19, show what's on the horizon, and list a few steps the state should do to secure its economic future. That'll be great. Okay, before we get going, before we hear from Dennis, here is your trivia question for Dennis. Dennis reports he has 2 old cars, both about 20 years old, far older than the average American car. What other event happened 20 years ago, that's 2001, when his cars were rolling off the assembly line? Okay, multiple choice here. And remember, you're going to guess the answer. We're going to put up the question in just a second. Okay, what happened 20 years ago? A, the world was introduced to Shrek and Donkey. B, the biggest song of the year was Who Let the Dogs Out? Or C, scientists finished sequencing the human genome. Okay, A, the world was introduced to Shrek and Donkey. The biggest song of the year was Who Let the Dogs Out? And scientists finished sequencing the human genome. Okay, so mark your answers and we'll share the results in a few minutes. And now we're going to turn it over to Dr. Dennis Winters. Take it away, Dr. Winters. You can share your screen and go for it.
Okay. Before I do that, Susan, there's no place I would rather be than right here, right now. So,
okay.
Thanks for that. And who? I don't know who invited me or who let the dogs out, but I don't know if that's the right answer either. I think I'll start with a couple disclaimers. I work for the state of Wisconsin. Nothing that I will present today represents any opinion or policy of the state of Wisconsin, the governor, or anyone else, and perhaps not even my own. But we'll go through some interesting facts and figures and data, and certainly try to bring that down into where we've been and what we're looking at, what we expect to see going forward. And it's been a trying time between the Great Recession, the long economic expansion, and now this. I would love to be a professor teaching 21st century economics in about 10 years, because there's so much activity that's going to be going on. And in my introduction, I don't call it the new normal. I call it the next normal, because there's been so many new normals lately that whatever it's going to be coming on, it's going to be whatever the next one is that we can adapt to quickly and foster the benefits of all of that. So, so thanks for having me in. It's a pleasure. You live in a beautiful part of the country and certainly a beautiful part of the state. So we've been up there a few times and have always enjoyed it. I will share my screen now, and if I'm a quantitative economist by training and trade, so I'm not a policy wonk, and I don't offer any financial advice. If you don't know what to do with your money, you can send it to me and check back with me in about 5 years via non-registered regular mail, and I'll respond accordingly. So, but what I want to talk to you about is the economy and what has happened over the last year. 2020, from an economic perspective, is going to go down in history as the COVID-19 year. So I'll be putting in lots of facts and figures in front of you. That's what I do for a living, and that's actually what I like doing for a living. So if you can see the first screen here, U.S. gross domestic product. So that's a measure of all the goods and services we produce in the U.S. And it's a percent change quarterly. And the SAAR, the seasonally adjusted annual rate, that's how we present it going forward as we look at periods that we compare from one to another. And this is every quarter since 1947, so post-war, post-World War II. And you can see the ups and downs as we go through. Obviously, the ones that are down, there's repeats of bars that are below zero. That usually designates a recession. And you can see the difference in growth periods. We are, obviously always interrupted by recession along the way. You can see some long periods of non-negative growth anywhere. One was in the 60s, right? Which was the longest until we hit the 90s, which became the longest until we hit the 2000s here following the Great Recession. And we had reached the longest economic expansion of modern history in the U.S. and maybe of all time, and then the pandemic hit. And you can see those bars on the far right. The first negative one is down a little bit. It was a little over 4%. And then the next quarter, after all this kicked in, which would be the second quarter of 2020, just a huge hemorrhage in the U.S. economy. So we dropped about a little over 30%, 31.4% in that quarter alone, seasonally adjusted annual rate. Nothing like it before. We actually, it's one of these things where we had to change the scale. We had to change our y-axis to even fit this in the graph. And I call this, we hear of U business cycles, U-shaped business cycles, V-shaped business cycles. I'm just kind of calling this one the bang boom or the bang boing, more like it. We'll see how that goes, because you can see here the next quarter, which was the third quarter of 2020, there was an increase of almost 33% in that turnaround of the U.S. economy. Again, nothing even close to it that we've seen certainly in recent history and even in modern history, being post World War II. So this is something that is different, unprecedented. It throws a whole wrench into our economic thinking and our economic models. There's not much we can do with this kind of data when you try to compare it, the ramifications of it and the effects of it as we look at it, as we go through history and the data we use there. So then my next slide is that was GDP. This is U.S. unemployment, the number of people employed in this case. And you can see in a month, right, 2 months, we went from essentially what was about 7 million people unemployed in the States to almost 25 million in the course of 1 month's worth of data. Now you can see that was the BAM, right? So we can see some boing in this way coming back the other way. We've recovered now about half of those jobs that we lost. So we're still down about 11 million jobs, but it's a great return than what we were down when we were at about 22, 24 million jobs of people that were unemployed. So it was so severe, and the snapback has been equally severe as far as the data goes. You can see back in about the middle of the graph going into 2010, it was the Great Recession. And we know how severe that was. We know how many people were affected by that. We know how long it lasted. It was pretty much across geographies and every industry. And it was a great recession. It was the worst economic, downturn we'd had since the Great Depression back in the 30s. And look how it compares to where we're at. Now, it took quite some time for us to recover out of that Great Recession, longer than it had taken any other place to get back to normal. And this one is very severe and probably short-lived. And we'll talk a little bit more about that going forward as what the ramifications will be in the months and years to come. This is kind of a flip of this graph. This is Wisconsin jobs. And you see there's a lot of graphs in here, and I put it in here for a couple of reasons. Because we look at this stuff day in and day out, and this is a representation of what we call current economic statistics, or current employment statistics, jobs. So this is a survey, but this is a highly prompt series. So we know this data within weeks of the month of which it ended, except right now, which is benchmarking, and I won't go into that. But so we usually get Wisconsin job numbers for the month of December, say, in about the second week in January. So these are prompt. And so we kind of keeps us on track of what's going on. Now the wavy lines, and so the upper group of lines there, upper two lines are what we call total non-farm jobs. The survey covers non-farm jobs, and farm jobs make up a small percentage of the total economy these days. So you've got T and F is total non-farm jobs, and then private sector jobs, which essentially eliminates the government, both federal, state, and local. And the wobbly lines there, the ones that look like a very regular pattern, it is a very regular pattern, because you can see the seasonality in the jobs here in Wisconsin, how they ebb and flow. They peak during the summer and are lower in the wintertime as construction and tourism and things like that kind of cut back. And then when a lot of it comes back around early in the spring and into the summer, you get the gains again in jobs. So, and then the straighter lines, the green one and kind of the light blue one, those are what we call seasonally adjusted jobs. So because that seasonality that we see is so readily apparent in pattern, we adjust for that. And we adjust for that because we know what's going to happen, and we try to adjust it for the seasonality so that we can have some prediction on the number that we see, if that's different than what it should be in, say, March versus what we normally see in March, which is a gain from February. So that tells us even in March, if the economy is healthier than it was in February or not, on a seasonally adjusted basis. But you can see here in these graphs how in 2 months in Wisconsin, total non-farm jobs dropped some 455,000 jobs. just like that, again, right out the door, how they've recovered. And we'll talk a little bit about that, what's recovered and how it's recovered by industry and what that means now and going forward, and the things we look at that way. So it's been, again, a big, and I don't know if my cursor is showing on these graphs.
Yes.
Okay. So here's the big bam and the boing, right, that I'm talking about. So this is what we're seeing in this pattern. Back here is the Great Recession, right? But by comparative purposes, it's a whole different kind of egg in severity and duration than we're used to seeing through business cycles. This is our unemployment insurance claims year-over-year change, and this is another thing there. The light bars designate recessions, and I wanted to bring this one out here because you probably read the paper, and it showed about we had a little problem with UI claims and the UI system at the state of Wisconsin. It did many states, and this is why. You can see that big wide gray bar. That was the Great Recession. Unemployment was very high. We got about 10%, over 10% in the state, and the system was taxed. And the funds that go in there in the trust fund, it's a closed loop, and so we were dealing with that, and it was difficult then. And then we had this long economic expansion where, people were mostly employed. We got down to essentially historical lows on unemployment. So what does government do through business cycles? Well, they don't spend any money when times are good, certainly on infrastructure. And you can see that both internal and external. And when you have a recession, a lot of the money that's available goes to more important things like social services and things like that, where people deem more important than our infrastructure. So you had this long, unprecedented period of non-use, relative non-use of the unemployment insurance system until March of 2020, and then those percentages on the left axis there, those are real, right? That's 1,300% change in the course of a week or two. So our system, the UI system in our state and many states was just not prepared, for anything even approaching this. So why did it break? Because it got overloaded. It wasn't prepared for anything we've seen like that, and the lack of investment over a generation almost, just didn't put the systems in. You read the papers too. Some of this stuff, if you're a COBOL programmer, right? You don't even teach COBOL anymore, right? But if you're a COBOL programmer, you could probably find yourself a job with the state right now in the unemployment insurance division, because that's the architecture, right? That's the software they're using on mainframes that are just antiquated. So this looks like something like the Sears Tower, or even what they've got in Dubai as far as the skyscraper goes, or even Frank Lloyd Wright's mile-high skyscraper at this point. So, but this is this is something that hit the system that the system wasn't prepared for, and that's why we had all the problems we had with that. Changing over a little bit to industry, changes by industry. Up in your neck of the woods, you have a lot of leisure and hospitality, and you can see here as we go across. To the far left is the total non-farm jobs we were talking about. So that's all the jobs and how it took the big hit in May. Those are May numbers. Actually, it all started in March and April, but May was the most severe in Wisconsin job numbers. And then what happened by September and then December. So you can see construction was higher, and actually construction now, right, at least of December, was above where it was the year before COVID hit. Manufacturing took some of it hit, but it has recovered to a large extent. And what we're seeing, hearing, and seeing in construction is that there's a call for workers. They can't find enough talent at this point, and even with everything that's happened, and we can go forward. You see retail, right, took a big hit, and it came back pretty well actually. But there's a whole change in retail. It went from to the big box stores. And through Amazon and things like that, which is why if you go to the next one, warehousing, see how warehousing and distribution has popped, right? I had to move some furniture the other day, and I went over to the U-Haul place, and I wanted to rent a van. And he said, "We don't have any vans." Like, what do you mean you don't have any vans? He says, FedEx has leased out all our vans. So FedEx is delivering everything, as is Amazon, as is everybody. And that's why those warehousing numbers pop back like they did. Education, we saw the hits in education. That's a lot of support services and teachers. A lot of that is in state university system, and a lot of that is in student jobs. So those are some of the folks that took the hit on the education side. Healthcare, while there's we hear about the lack of space across hospitals, that's in acute care and in emergency care. All the clinics, where you're trying to get your new knee or your new hip, things like that, that was postponed. So there was employment there. Now the big bars, right? Leisure and hospitality. I call these kind of the congregational industries. This is where people want to get together. They go out, congregate, then family and friends. That became a no-no, right? And you can see the drops there. Leisure and hospitality, especially in accommodations, employment was down 50% at one point. Huge. And it happened again overnight. And it hasn't recovered. Still down almost 30% in accommodations. And, generally speaking, in leisure and hospitality, hasn't recovered. It won't recover until people are confident enough to get back out, right, and join with other people in the establishments of which they used to frequent. You can see state government has been up and down, local government, things like that. In this data series, local and state government don't include education. But so that's the demarcations we've seen between the industries and how they've been affected and how they're going to come back and when they're going to come back. On the whole, manufacturing is doing well. Construction, is doing well, and that's a time for a whole nother session. What's going on in, say, the housing markets? About the only thing that is doing well in housing markets is single-family home construction. None of the government stuff, none of the multifamily, none of the industrial or hotels or anything like that. So let me go to the next slide then. So I'm shifting gears here a little bit. So that was what happened, partial of what happened in 2020. It was severe, it was rapid, it was the BAM and the boing, and we think the boing will come around more. It's kind of a race right now between fiscal health and inoculations. So that's the race that's going on right now, and it seemed to be on the downhill side of this. And if you are of significant, or I should say, enough of an age, you can raise your hand about qualifying at least for getting COVID vaccines, if you've got it or not. Some have had 2, some have had none. I haven't had any yet, but I snagged one for tomorrow. So, but that's the situation. Now, as we go forward here, we go forward into 2021, go forward into 22 and 23, and things get back to the next normal. The graph I have here in front of you is essentially unalterable. And I've been using this graph for way too long. I published on all this out of the university in 2000, based on 97 data. But what this shows is Wisconsin's population and its labor force from 1960 and projected out to 2030. So you can see the yellow line, right? That's population. It's been growing pretty much at a fairly constant rate, and will continue to do so as we see going forward. And this is great data. This is demographic data. So I say every hour y'all get an hour older. That's not going to change. This is some of the best data we have. And what I'm about to say, we knew when it was going to happen, why it was going to happen, how it was going to happen. I say the only thing we knew with more accuracy than this was Y2K. Right? This is all really good data. We know it's how it's going to happen because it's the blue line, the civilian labor force in Wisconsin, that presents the problem. You can see how it starts to flatten out, and it may even go negative by 2035. 3 things about this. 1, it's never happened before. We've never had to worry about a flattening, much less declining workforce. 2, it's not going away. Again, it's demographic data. We are absolutely certain about this path, and pretty much, very small error around this. And the third thing that is so important for Wisconsin's economy is that if we don't raise the productivity of the worker, we can't pay them anymore. And if we can't pay them anymore, right, they're not going to buy anything else. And if they're not going to buy anything else, we're not going to produce anything else. We're not going to hire people, pay them to produce nothing that's demanded. And if you don't have the labor force growth, you don't have the earnings growth, you don't have the income growth, which is usually always spawned by productivity increases in economic perspective, you're looking at a potentially stagnant economy. And all this is going to come right back. You may have heard and known that people can't find enough talent. Everybody's complaining about business. I can't find this. I can't find help. I can't, and this is going to be right back in our face again as we get back to the next normal after COVID. And this is what's happening in Wisconsin. This is what's happening in the upper Midwest. This is what's happening through a lot of the U.S., Western Europe, even across the world. China workforce is topped out. Its population is supposed to top out about 2050. There's actually a worker shortage, a talent shortage, I should say, in China. So workforce talent is the resource of the 21st century. And that's what it's going to be, and that's how it's going forward. So that's what we're going to expect to see. We've known this has been coming. It's going to be right back at us again as it was when we came out of the Great Recession. The only thing that's happened here is the baby boomers are going to be another year older or so. And it's all about the baby boomers aging out. 10,000 of us a day reaching retirement age. And not quite enough people to come back rapidly enough to replace us. So I'm going to change gears a little bit more here. This is kind of looking more into the future. And I'm trying to stay on track. I'm running a little bit behind, but there are two classes of jobs in the new age. Those that are augmented by automation and those that will be replaced by automation. And this is some work we've done, what we call a propensity for automation by occupational group. And along the x-axis on the bottom is the percent of employment that these occupational groups constitute in the workforce. And up the left is the propensity of automation. So if we look way up in the northwest corner, you've got farming. Not very many people employed in farming, but highly susceptible to automation. And I don't know if you've been on a modern farm these days. I'm going to leave you with just this term. It's not plastics. But the latest technology that I've seen, it's called a laser-guided teat seeker. So you can write that one down, laser-guided teat seeker. And what it is a cow comes in, a laser looks at the udder, puts the machine on to milk the cow, untouched by human hands, essentially through a cow's whole day. It gets incentivized to come in and goes away. There's a whole little piece about that too, but I can't get into tonight. So as you go across looking at other ones that have a high propensity for automation, you look at food prep, sales, production, right? Administrative support. They're going to be automated out essentially by software and computers, and shifting a lot of the burden to the customer. If on the other hand, now if we look back down in the southwest corner, you see science, math and computing, arts, architectural engineering, social service, right? Education, healthcare. They make up fair size of employment, but very low propensity for automation. These are people on people jobs, right? And we just don't have the technology there yet to, for arts, and for the sciences and architectural and engineering, and certainly healthcare and social practices back and forth where it's people on people. So, all you people in the people business, should kind of feel good that you're not going to be so much automated out. But here's the kicker. Now let's bring in AI, artificial intelligence, right? And what is artificial intelligence? It's just supercomputing power with super heavy data sets that allows us to do all kinds of things that the human brain can do, and do it quickly, fast enough, and accurately enough to make it worthwhile. So I took that automation data and I mixed it with some AI data, and just that graph on the right is from where the data came to make the comparisons. And you can see how things have changed. So if you look at those, farming is still about even. You got the architectural engineering and science and computing, which weren't affected much by automation, or the blue bars. Look how they're going to be affected by AI. So any of this kind of thing, if it takes you more than I think they say, if it takes you more than 1/10 of a second to make the decision, it can be AI. So a lot of these brain power type jobs, right, are going to feel a lot of hit and a lot of exposure to artificial intelligence. And and this is still all just mechanical, but I bought a new car, not a new car, it's a 2017 just the other day. Sorry, I had one of my 20-year-old cars finally bit it. And this thing won't let me change lanes if I'm cruising down the highway. It tells me that I should keep my hand on the steering wheel, but it brings me right back into the lane. That's the car doing it, not me. And that's just robotics with a little bit of, optical sensor and data. So I want to finish with this. I think this is kind of humorous, and hopefully you'll get the sound and everything. And this is part of where the state of robotics is. And this is from Boston Dynamics. And I encourage you to go watch some of the videos, other videos of theirs. But we'll see if we can get some. Hopefully we can. Can you hear it?
We can't hear it.
Is there no music with it? All right, well, let me stop it for a second. If I can't get it going in just a second, I will have you, I guess I'll have to have you look this up. Let me see.
We could
I
see
don't
it
know what I
move.
can do on the sound side. If anybody there has got some ability to do that. But the reason the sound is fun is because it's the song, So Do You Love Me, right? So you don't want me around because I can't dance, right? So if you got headphones, maybe you can hear it. So it's like, but love me, do you love me? You may recognize the song. Watch me now. So these things are now self-synced, right? The yellow one's called a dog. So you can independently program these. You can program to work off each other. And this one looks like an ostrich, but it's being used a lot in processing, and particularly warehousing things. Those big red things are suction cups, and it goes around and transports boxes and such and so forth around. And these are moves that I can't do.
Oh, yikes.
And this will come back a second. I want you to watch the dog here, and this little delicate move by it. I don't know if it'll ever replace a ballerina, but so I encourage you to go out and see other videos, State of Robotics, from I think Boston Dynamics, and it's just incredible stuff that you'll see there. There's some other links to some of them, but they have robots now that they send them out into a field, and when things stumbles, it just rights itself. Or when it falls down, they have one that they did a backflip off a box. And of course, it made the flip, right? And then they show the one that didn't quite make the flip and crashes. It gets back up, rights itself, and goes on. So if you want to scare yourself, go look at some of that stuff. So the takeaways in my talk here: the economy is it's a recovery is pending. I'd say we're into it. We're facing a labor quantity challenge that's not going away, and how we're going to be dealing with that. Technology will be part of it, and then technology is just going to continue to advance, perhaps faster than we're aware. So that's the remarks I prepared. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah, so fun stuff.
Well, who needs people when you got those guys?
The song
Dan.
2525.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right. Well, thanks for those comments. That was quite eye-opening. Maybe not in the most fun way, but anyway, thank you very much. Okay. Before we get going with questions, let's go back to our trivia question and find out what happened the same year as Dennis's car rolled off the assembly line. All right. The world was introduced to Shrek and Donkey, got 4%. The biggest song of the year was Who Let the Dogs Out, got 12%. Scientists finished sequencing the human genome, got 84%. And you're almost all wrong. It was Shrek and Donkey. So the Who Let the Dogs Out was in 2000.
Yeah, who played the donkey?
Eddie Murphy.
There we go.
And the human genome was 2003. So, I fooled you guys this time. Okay, so let's get to your questions now. Find your Q&A button down there at the bottom and use that to type in your questions. And I see we've already got a couple, so we're going to start right away. Okay, so are we good with number one here, Gretchen? Okay, so Dennis, do you think COVID has led to earlier retirements? And if so, that this could exacerbate or accelerate the difference in the labor force?
Well, perhaps we don't have data on that yet. We have seen the flows in the number of people in the workforce, and some have left and dropped out. They couldn't find jobs. Other family members came in looking for jobs, and they dropped out. But this is such a condensed period, and the rate at which boomers have been retiring anyway, I don't think it's going to exacerbate it much. And the thing I think that would exacerbate it more than the COVID and the technology right now, is the portfolio, is their investment portfolios. As the stock markets have been going crazy, so people might be feeling more comfortable that way. And with some of the technology and working from home, perhaps they figure, okay, it's time for me to go. We'll see as it comes back, though. When these businesses open up, even the mom and pop shops that had to shut down and lost those people, those will spring back. And if not particularly that mom and pop, right? If there's a demand for that product, there'll be another shop that just pops right up for anything with low barriers of entry. So a lot of this, I think, will turn around. What we didn't get into was the debt service of the populace. Our personal balance sheets are better than they've been in probably almost 2 generations. So there is idle cash, and there's a lot of idle cash around. And once people get back to where they feel comfortable again, like I say, it's kind of a fiscal COVID inoculation race. That money's going to come pouring out, and it's going to get used, and the demand is going to soar. We should see a few good quarters. Probably the end of 21, certainly in 22, when everybody's comfortable coming back.
Okay. What is the status of the Foxconn investment? Will a plant ever be built and the employment promises fulfilled?
I can't really comment on that. I don't know enough about it. I do know that if it happens as was planned, it would change manufacturing as an industry across the state, would change finance as an industry. Biggest project in the U.S., biggest single project in the U.S. Obviously, it's not coming along as originally envisioned. But other than that, I can't tell you where it's at or what the expectations are at this point going forward. I don't know.
Okay. Okay, you shared a bar graph showing changes by industry in Wisconsin. It seems that employment must be different depending on where you are. In Woodruff, Wisconsin, around here, stores, manufacturing, restaurants, and schools are open. Businesses are advertising to hire people. Is unemployment less of an issue up here or in rural areas?
Our unemployment rates have come way down in a hurry. And like I say, by industry, and manufacturing, it actually is one of the major employers across the state, particularly in the northeast and the southeast, but even up, in the northern part. So depending on what your concentration is, by essentially the tourism industry, are the things that are being affected now. And it depends what kind of tourism. Again, if it's congregational tourism, taking a big hit. If it's out snowmobiling on your own, or skiing, or camping, things like that, a lot of places have been inundated. Actually, I mean, RV sales are way up. Have been inundated by demand for the products and services. So it kind of depends on almost the business by business and industry by industry. So one of the things that we've had discussions about, this is a bit of a sideline, is that if construction firms and manufacturing firms are crying for workers, and yet you've got all these people unemployed on the leisure and hospitality industry, why don't we just suck them right over and put them to work? Well, a number of things. One, they might not be in the same locations. Two, the skill sets that you need of dealing with people, if you're a hostess or a waiter or some sort of hospitality job, that is a very people on people skill set, and you have flexible hours or a shift that you like that works for you, that might not be compatible working a 8 to 4:30 job in a manufacturing plant all day, every day, with little flexibility. Not to mention the skills you have, trying to take people skills back onto skills that may be dealing with inanimate objects, right, day in and day out. So, and just the safety training and everything else. So they're not all the same shape pegs and the same shape holes. So that's just not an immediate transfer that you can make.
Okay. What can the state do to attract talent?
Well, what attracts talent? Lifestyle, earnings, schools, healthcare, all those things that you look forward to as a worker. Those are some of the programs that, I mean, it used to be in the day that, if you try to attract businesses, and if you attracted businesses, the workers would come. That's not the case anymore. Now you have to attract the talent, because that's what businesses are looking for. That's what they need. That's what they're crying for. So if you don't have the talent, right, your economy is at risk. So what the incentives have to change. They have to change to attract the talent, not the businesses. So look at the things that attract talent, right? So again, it's earnings, it's your lifestyle, it's that one that you want to live, one that you can afford to live, and what's best for your family. So those are the things that you have to compete with. And now it's not just Wisconsin, like I said. I mean, it's Illinois, it's Iowa, it's Minnesota, it's Ohio, it's Western Europe, are all competing for this limited talent resource. So you can't just try to get everybody here from Illinois, because one, Illinois doesn't want to lose their people. Two, Indiana's going for those people. Michigan's going for those people. Texas is going for those people, right? Singapore is going for those people. So it's a different game. So the incentives have to change. And that's where the big policy debate is. Some are a little bit more behind the curve, I think, than others should be. But and that's one reason I took this job, because all the work I was doing in private consulting was showing it was going to the workforce. And this job became available. I jumped in to be in the middle of it, and in my beloved state. And this is something we've been talking about, and I'm kind of getting a little hoarse about it all. But again, it's finally catching on, and those are the policies, and the programs and the initiatives that have to be instituted both in the state and in the country. Now, the good news is America is still a country that people want to come to, right? So that's an advantage we have over a lot of other countries across the globe for opportunities that will attract that scarce global resource.
Okay. How would you change how we educate children to be more ready for the workforce?
Ooh. And I say ooh because this is one of my soapboxes. I'm all about early childhood development. I got attracted to that from the economic standpoint, and there is no better economic investment that is as low risk, as high a return in perpetuity than quality early childhood development. And that's education. That's everything else that goes with 3 to 5 year olds in particular. I'm actually a prenatal to age 8. schooler in the sense that we know that what conditions are that affect um, kids before they're born, low birth weight, things like that. You know what the lifetime ramifications are of that. But mostly, you know, we try to solve the problem in the late years in high school or even after high school. It's too late, too expensive, too late. I mean, the odds of being incarcerated if you're not a high school graduate go way up really fast. So it's one of these pay me now or pay me later. We spend a lot of time and money and resources incarcerating people and trying to take care of them. We spend very little public resource on the front end that we could prevent all of that. And I've got scads and scads of data, information, and reports on the economic value of quality early childhood development programs at ages 3 and 4. So, and if anybody wants to see that, I'll wash them in that information that mostly I'm parroting at this point because the work's been done by Nobel laureates and many other people much smarter than me that have an interest in that, and it's incredible about it. So that's on the very early end. If you put all your resources there, not all your resources, but you put a lot of your resources there, and it's not that big a number. You will make everything down the road easier and cheaper. And those returns start not in 20 years when you invest in the kid, but right away, as far as teacher health, as far as reductions in special ed. I mean, the list goes on and on. So and when should we do it? Well, I go back to my natural resource days when the old forester, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago, right? The next best time is now. So the sooner and earlier we can do it, the better. On the other end, I've written a bit of an article on what I call the nest egg. You can look that up at Wiscape, and it's about actually using a penny worth of sales tax to pay for a 13th year of education that would be free to public Wisconsin public high school graduates. So that's another thing that you may want to look up and look at and be able to use that money not only for that, but for early childhood development too. So if you're interested in spending another penny, $1 on your sales tax, we can make huge improvements in a pretty short time. The other thing we do in real estate is location. In the workforce and our economy now, it's training. So, and get everybody what I call the next rung up. So if you don't have a high school diploma, get a high school diploma. If you have one, get some kind of post-secondary training at some college, if it's tech college degree. If you've got a bachelor's degree, get a master's degree. If we just took everybody and got one more rung up the ladder, and the corresponding correlated wages that go with it, we would solve a lot of our economic problems. Because as some studies we've done, I'm going to throw this in here because it's not published. It's just some internal work we've been doing that the way things are going with the education gains we have, the slow growth in the workforce, and the town structure there, our per capita income may actually start to decrease. And if that happens, that's huge. If people ask me what's the one thing I look at the dynamics of per capita income in the long haul. And if that all happens, then we've got increased tax burden. So how are we going to fund all our infrastructure from roads to computer systems to schools to hospitals and things like that? So we're on a cusp that could be very serious because as that blue line, yellow line graph showed, we're in new territory and it's not going away.
Here's an infrastructure question. Increased high-speed internet access is a priority here in the North Woods. Are there other investments or improvements that communities should consider to stimulate economic development?
I think that's number one, is broadband access and capacity. Because it may be even more critical as we come out of COVID and people decide that, they actually do want to work at home, or they can work at home, or they can work in Minocqua, as opposed to San Jose or something like that. So what are the incentives and attractions we have to bring people to those places? But I issue this caveat is that I would say don't be spending your time and resources on current hardwired broadband. I would tell you to go satellite and go 5G as quickly and as fast as you can. Because anybody who doesn't adapt to 5G from essentially a satellite-based superstructure is going to be left behind. It's going to be too good. It's going to be too fast, too good. It can permeate anywhere that landlines can't, that towers can't. One thing that helped the third world, right, was when they got cell towers, because they didn't have the infrastructure to run the hard wires. America had a lot of that infrastructure and updated it and put in cell towers. Well, if you go satellite based, you can go anywhere and everywhere, and that's happening now. SpaceX has got a big plan to do that, and you got to go to 5G because it's so much faster. So I would turn your resources not into any of the stuff where you got to dig a hole, but go the other way. The other important point about that is what I call the last foot, which a lot of rural areas are used to, like the last mile. Can we get power in there? Can we get broadband in the last mile? But we talk about the last foot, and this is more about some rural areas, but urban areas. There's a lot of internet access deserts, right, in highly populated areas, because they're not in the buildings, they're not into wherever it has to go. So rural deserts and urban deserts, the solution could very much be the same, but it has to happen, and it has to happen rapidly, because that technology is here and it's being installed, and it's going to be the last in line are going to be left even further behind than they are now. So yes, move along those lines.
Okay. What is your view of the impact of the labor shortage on state budgets?
That's actually that question is very deep. There's a lot to that, and one thing I love about economics is nothing's linear, right? Depending on what happens, and I kind of talked about that with productivity, right? If we don't have the talent to match to the technology, productivity is not going to advance. And we need that to compensate just for the lack of physical bodies, people. What's it going to do to state finances? Well, if we don't do that, if we don't get the productivity up, if we don't match the talent with the technology, right, we're going to lose. Because if you have the talent and not the technology, the talent goes away, right? If you have the technology and not the talent, the technology goes away. The capital goes somewhere else. So you have to match those and bring them together. And if you don't do it, at a pace necessary, like I talked about, we're looking at lower per capita income. Tax burdens are going to go up, which affects all your public sector and all the infrastructure that goes there. So again, I don't want to be henny penny, but we're in a situation that things have changed. This is a new environment based on the demographics that we're seeing now, primarily from an economic standpoint.
Why is the state revenue higher than anticipated when the unemployment rate is still high?
Interesting question. And we had this talk just the other day, and there was a lot of predictions, me included, that were worried about what was going to happen to state and local coffers. One of the things that was kind of surprising is we saw a lot of money being spent at the retail level, which is all taxed, right? And we saw automobiles, being purchased. So a lot of those site purchases, right, especially on the retail side and the sales tax side, weren't impacted as badly as what may have been. Certainly, the revenue coming in from hotels and bars and restaurants, the tax revenue there way down. And I know a lot of and rental cars. I know a lot of tourism areas, right, have tax packages that are based on that, and those have taken a hit. But at the state level, a lot of that tax revenue that we thought was just going to go away actually didn't, and in some things it's actually higher than it was as it was last year, as it was predicted, and as we thought the situation was going to be around COVID. So it was that, yeah, that's kind of a surprising development. That was one of the early questions I had on with my bosses. Well, when are we going to start to see furloughs? Right. Because we experienced those back in the last recession, and so far it's been we're not taking as serious a hit on the tax side at this point than we expected.
Okay. Wisconsin has a healthy tourism industry. How does prioritizing funds for natural resources play a role in keeping this industry strong?
Well, it's a little bit tangent to what I do, but I'll stick in with kind of my natural resource background. Is why do people come to recreate, right? In Wisconsin, they come for the clean water, the fresh air, the countryside, the fishing, the woods, those kind of things. So, if you pollute the product, right, you pollute the business, and I think that's true with any kind of business. If you don't have a winning team, nobody's going to show up. So those are the things so what is it that is driving your local tourism industry? And those are the things that you've got to take care of. There's nothing you can do about the weather. Well, I'm not even going to go there, but in the short term, farming and tourism are somewhat subject to the weather. And you've seen industry invest in destination sites and more, expand out across the months of the year. We know, and you may well be aware, every year they do a study that shows who recreates where and when. And so we have a lot of information about that, but you gotta supply a premium product.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the UW-Madison master's degree agroecology? And if so, is this a program worthwhile? What types of work and employment can a person find with having this education?
I'm not that familiar with it. I know the UW-Madison has reinstituted some master's programs because they're attractive, and there was some financial incentive to do that. I think anybody, I think it's a good move if you're interested in that kind of thing. I think more education and training is better if that's what it is you want to do for a living. I'm kind of an advocate of find a job you love and you never work a day in your life. And so if that's what you want to do, if your main driver is I want to make a lot of money, I would say that might not be the profession you want to go into. I would go into banking, and I'd particularly go into investment. I'd particularly go to New York.
Okay.
Or IT, and start your own firm.
Do you think is a shortage of skilled labor our biggest risk?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We are ready for one more question? Okay, hang on. How long are state budget deficits from COVID projected to last?
Well, as we talked about, depending the local governments are being, and the tourism districts are being more affected than the state government. So I think that's concomitant upon when it turns around. And as I talked about, I think once we get past or past COVID, but once we get people confident enough to go out with their personal COVID situation, and the spending has been there, it just hasn't been along the same lines. So the budget's pretty healthy, and I think it'll turn around in fairly quickly. So I don't think the budget deficits, and I wouldn't call them serious budget deficits, at least at this point, will turn around in a hurry. So, there's always a lag about when the economy turns around and when that cash starts coming in from tax revenue. But we're in better shape now than a lot of people projected.
Well, that's good news. Okay, well, thank you so much. Thanks to Dennis Winters. Thanks to everyone who participated, especially everyone who wrote in questions, and to our sponsors, the Lakeland Badger Chapter of the Wisconsin Alumni Association, Minocqua Public Library, UW Kemp Natural Resources Station and UW Trout Lake Station, and the Brittingham Foundation. Remember, our next Science on Tap will be April 7th, when we will have artist Mary Burns talking about her art and science project, Women and Water. If you want to sign up for email reminders of our events, please go to our website, Science on Tap Minocqua, and click Contact Us and leave your email address. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dennis. It was tremendously educational, and we'll see everyone next month.